Hello, everybody. I'm here with Chad McBain, and my name is Luke McBain. Together, we're two brothers in Bitcoin. Hello, Chad. We have the elections are upcoming. Ooh, big moment. I mean, I'm in. By the way, just full disclosure, I'm a Canadian German living in Berlin, Germany, and you're a Canadian living in Canada, Guelph, Canada.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're not U.S. citizens. We're not voting. Either or, but the whole world is watching, and we are watching. I think we're also watching from Europe, from Germany, what's going to happen in the presidential elections. And you wanted to talk today a little bit about, how this will affect Bitcoin and
Right.
why this might be of interest for us. Why, is there going? Sometimes you think like these presidential elections, nothing's going to change. It's like maybe it's like a one-party system, but so there's not going to be some change. But well, is there going to be change in terms of Bitcoin?
Yeah. So depending on where we go with this conversation, we should say from the start that this is not financial advice. If any comes out today, any speculation on our part, and shouldn't be construed as financial advice at all. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting from the Bitcoin perspective. I think we're going to steer away for the most part of the politics and policies of the two primary candidates, but um, the policies we will discuss is their crypto slash Bitcoin policies, and maybe a little bit of history as well. Because interestingly enough, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have been pretty hostile towards Bitcoin and the broader crypto markets. The Trump administration from 2016 to 2020, early 2021, I guess, was pretty hostile towards Bitcoin. Trump, I can't remember if he called it a scam, but he certainly said that he didn't like it, and he liked the U.S. dollar. And the person that he appointed to the head of the SEC was a gentleman named Steve Mnuchin. It might have
Mm.
been the secretary treasurer, actually. I have to check that. So I could be wrong, but his head financial watchdog, I guess, on his last day in office, launched multiple lawsuits against several crypto companies. Um, and then the Biden administration, or I guess now we'll call it the Biden-Harris administration, since she's running, um, has been openly hostile towards Bitcoin and crypto. Um, there's been multiple SEC lawsuits against various companies in the space. Um, the rejection for many years under both administrations of the approval of ETFs. And I know some people are going to say, well, the Biden administration approved an ETF earlier this year, but um, call me a pessimist, but I don't think it was the Biden administration's progressive understanding of Bitcoin, crypto, and technology that got that approved. I think it was because BlackRock and Fidelity both said we want a Bitcoin ETF. And I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories about how powerful they are, particularly BlackRock, but I don't think it's any coincidence that when they decided that they would like an ETF, that an ETF got approved. So um, so both administrations previously have been pretty hostile towards Bitcoin. Now, present day, starting, I would say, in May or June of this year, President Trump or former President Trump, depending on how you're supposed to refer to him. I always get confused because some people call him all former presidents, they refer to them as president, and some people call them former president. So I'm not sure what the right way to do it is. But anyway, former President Trump had agreed to go to the National Bitcoin Conference, which he did go to in July, and he gave a speech there. You can look it up on YouTube. I'm not going to get into it, but what they did was they actually put policy in place in the Republican policy and procedural manual that said that they were going to be pro crypto, pro Bitcoin. They encouraged the development of these technologies. And former President Trump went as far as to say that the Bitcoin that the US currently held um, they were going to keep as a treasury asset, and that they would probably build from that position as well. Now, how much and how long that would take, he didn't get into specifics, but I thought it was pretty interesting that the Republican Party itself then made Bitcoin part of their policy, and keeping it on the treasury and building that treasury position. Um, Shortly after that, Republican Senator from Wyoming, Cynthia Lummis, introduced a bill into the House, um, stating that the U.S. government over the next few years should build their Bitcoin reserves to 1 million Bitcoin.
Well,
So right
let's
now,
repeat. Let's repeat for everybody again. So they want, like, their suggestion is to build 1 million Bitcoin reserve out of how many existing Bitcoins exist in the world?
Just 21 million. Yeah,
21
so,
million. So
yeah.
if 21 million still exist, and we've talked about that, maybe they don't exist anymore. Maybe some of them got lost and all that. So that's an interesting proposal, no? To say, well, we as the United States, we want at least 1 million of those 21 or 19 or whatever is
Yeah.
left. So interesting. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it is.
Seems like a smart move.
I think it'd be a very smart move, and I think we're actually seeing what could potentially happen play out right now, because um, in so what are we, November 3rd here? November 3rd, 2023, 1 year ago today, there was no such thing as a Bitcoin ETF. I'm spitballing here, but the price of Bitcoin this time last year, I could probably look it up on my phone, but I'm just going to go off my head, probably somewhere in the $35,000 US range. 1 year later, we have the Bitcoin ETFs. There was 11 that were approved. Those ETFs now have combined just over 1 million Bitcoin they've accumulated. And the current price of Bitcoin, depending on what hour we're looking at, is around $70,000 US. Sometimes it's 69, sometimes it's 71, but it's around 70,000. So the price has basically doubled in a year, and I would say the vast majority of that price appreciation has been post ETF approval. So there was no such thing as an ETF a year ago. The ETFs have now been in existence for about, I guess, about 10 months, and they've accumulated combined over 1 million Bitcoin. So it's interesting when, I don't know if this bill will get passed or anything like that, but if you have a president, first of all, you have a president saying, a potential president, and certainly a presidential candidate, saying that they want to bring Bitcoin into the financial infrastructure of the United States. You have the Republican Party basically embracing that ideology. And then you have a senator introducing a bill suggesting that that the country should not only build on that policy, build on their reserves, but take that up to 1 million Bitcoin. So those things are interesting from the Republican side. On the Democratic side, and we can get further into the weeds in a minute, but just to be fair, to give the Democratic side some time. As I said already, the Biden administration has been very hostile to Bitcoin. There's a prominent senator in the Democratic Party, Elizabeth Warren, that I'm not sure what her point was, but a couple of years ago started the anti-crypto army or something like that. And she has a lot of sway, I guess, within the party. So typically, it's been very hostile. However, more recently, Kamala Harris has said that she's open to learning more and having further discussions about the benefits of Bitcoin and crypto, and that she wants to encourage. And she was kind of vague, but she wanted to encourage developing technologies and support the technology industry, and kind of lumped crypto and AI into that technology framework. So it's kind of ambiguous and a little unclear as to where they stand. But I guess if we want to be an optimist, what I would say is it wasn't negative. It was an encouraging statement, particularly coming from a Democratic leader. because that party has not been open to having any type of positive discussions about the industry at large and Bitcoin. So I would say that at least if we were to take them at their political word, whatever that's worth, both candidates are open to Bitcoin and some of its potential. It's pretty clear, at least based on public statements, that the Republican Party and former President Trump are a little bit more enthusiastic about it. But even Kamala Harris has said that she's certainly not anti-Bitcoin and anti-crypto. So we'll see what happens, but they both have shared varying degrees of what would you say, positive, thoughtful outlook for Bitcoin. Yeah.
So is this, I mean, it was a bill which is introduced, it hasn't been adopted, but at least it was, it's been introduced, has been written to have, that the US should own at least 1 million Bitcoin. Who knows if that's going to happen? It's good that you made a disclaimer up front saying this is not financial advice. It's not a projection. It's not like the Republicans, if they win immediately, they're going to start buying Bitcoin. But these are interesting developments, to say the least, and interesting proposals. Even putting them forward and discussing them openly, something which, a couple of years ago would have been unthinkable to even suggest that. And now these thoughts have started to emerge. Like, is that the future which we are facing, that governments have to then make the decision to buy Bitcoin or not? Again, the Bitcoin standard, the book and others, postulate, well, the adoption is just a matter of time, and the entities which are going to adopt Bitcoin are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, as I said, first, individuals, freaks, nerds, then just normal people, then companies. Now we have huge hedge fund companies, and we've seen also now some states, smaller states, adopting Bitcoin. In the end, it's also going to be bigger states. So that's the theory in general. Some of it has come true, not all of it. But back to the question. So is that the road governments have to take to either fight Bitcoin tooth and nail, or in the end to capitulate and say, okay, well, we can't win this. We now have to start buying some, at least, to make sure that we also hold some.
Yeah, and I think both could possibly be true. Just freestyling here, but when we look at, you mentioned there's several states now within the United States that have decided that they're going to keep Bitcoin in their state treasury, which is interesting. The first pension fund, and forgive me, it slips my mind, but it was announced last week or the week before that the first major pension fund in the US has decided that they would like to add Bitcoin to their investment strategy. It's only 1%. And I don't know how big the pension fund is, but I'm sure it's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. But it's not the amount, it's more the mindset itself, to your point, that people that even 2 years ago would have laughed at this idea are actually having these discussions. And have probably been having these discussions for months, maybe even a year or two, because if you're a massive pension fund, you don't just come out one day and say, well, we're going to do this. You've been probably having these discussions for a while. I saw in the news recently that Microsoft's annual shareholder meeting is coming up in December. And on the agenda for the shareholder meeting is, should Microsoft add Bitcoin to the company treasury? Which I found interesting because Microsoft, as we all know, is a massive global company. Now, I should point out, in all fairness, the board of directors doesn't want to do this, but it was brought up by a number of shareholders, and therefore it was put on the agenda for the shareholder meeting. And they're going to have a vote amongst the shareholders as to whether they should allocate a percentage to Bitcoin for the company treasury. Now, the reason they're having this discussion, I'm sure, is because of what MicroStrategy For those that don't know, MicroStrategy is a US company that it's a software company that I guess about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, added Bitcoin to its treasury, and then has since aggressively been adding Bitcoin to its treasury to the point where I think they now hold somewhere in the neighborhood of like 17 or 18 billion dollars worth of Bitcoin on the company treasury. MicroStrategy, if I'm being fair, was a mid-level software company in the US whose stock really hadn't traded up or down much in over a decade. It was always roughly within a few percentage points of what it was the year before. In the last 4 years, that stock has gone up 17-fold. And in the last, I would say, year and a half, a little over a year anyway, it is the best performing stock on the New York Stock Exchange. Better than NVIDIA, which is in the news, is in the business news, and even the regular news all the time as being this great stock that everybody's clamoring to get. Well, MicroStrategy's outperformed it by a significant amount. So I think there's plenty of people out there that are probably looking at Bitcoin as an investment that probably know nothing about Bitcoin, but they're looking at a company like MicroStrategy on the stock market saying, how does this mid-level software company go from $100 a share to $1,700 a share in a very short amount of time? And they've done nothing different with their software business. They've added Bitcoin and keep adding more and more Bitcoin. So whether these are corporate discussions or treasury discussions or state discussions or pension fund discussions, or to our original topic, which was political discussions, these discussions are clearly going on in plenty of rooms. The BRICS countries recently had a meeting, and one of many ideas that they've been tabling is having, if not their own currency, certainly trading in a basket of currencies amongst those countries. And one of the things that they had said was Bitcoin would be part of that, as well as gold, as well as obviously other currencies. So here you've got, I don't know to what extent, but you have at least 5 or 6 countries in the BRICS core group, and then as many as I think 50 that have attended BRICS meetings in the last year, that, or at least again, having these discussions about, well, if we're going to trade amongst each other in certain currencies or a basket of currencies, what does that makeup of that basket look like? And Bitcoin is part of this conversation. And it was recently revealed on CNBC that at least 3 of the BRICS nations, I don't know which ones, I didn't follow that closely, but at least 3 of them are actually mining Bitcoin. So we know for a fact that Iran is. It's believed that Saudi Arabia is. And it's believed that China probably is. China or Russia, possibly both.
When we talk about mining, it's not that there are individuals sitting in basements mining. You are saying the governments themselves have commissioned some sort of mining, and this is going into the state treasury when the Bitcoin is mined. So that's when you say they are mining. These countries are mining. Oh yeah. So that's but it's not. This is not a public fact. This is just a rumor, or how do you know that this is like?
Well, Iran has admitted it.
Okay.
And then the other 2 countries, I think, is more conjecture. But the person that made the claim was the CEO of, and I can't remember whether it was Franklin Templeton or BNY Mellon, but an older US financial institution. And he is staking his reputation when he makes comments like that. So I have no reason to believe him completely, and I have no reason to disbelieve him. But the fact that somebody in his position would make those comments would suggest there's probably something there, And he said that he knows for a fact that there's at least 3 BRICS nations that are mining Bitcoin. Well, the nation itself, not mining going on within the nation, but the actual government mining.
And well, that's very interesting. And I mean, it's again, like the development is interesting. We go from again, just to remind people, like a few years ago, at least I personally, I think you see it a little bit different. I was still getting panic attacks because the SEC would not allow an ETF, a Bitcoin ETF, and I thought, oh well, this is a sign that the U.S. doesn't want this. Like they just hate it, and it's a competition to the dollar, and they're sooner or later they're just going to destroy Bitcoin. And it's a global power, and they'll maybe place embargoes on countries which might
Sure.
Bitcoin, and all everything like that came through my mind because I thought, well, things have happened in the past when the U.S. dollar got attacked, where the U.S. was not very
Yep.
didn't respond with a lot of kindness, let's put it that way. But then it came through that they were approved, and this sort of like a threshold was crossed in my mind, at least a threshold was crossed from which it's difficult to return to turn back the clock and say to BlackRock, by the way, we're now banning your ETF, yeah,
Right.
guys. So
Yeah.
because we sort of like sense that, yeah, they might just be too powerful to tell them what to do or not to do. But now we're going to the next level where we're discussing, well, there are now some nation states and we can say we've taken up Bitcoin as legal tender. Okay, they're just very small states, they're irrelevant backwater states. Who cares about them? What they do is irrelevant. The next thing is what I hear is like there's certain states, governments, which now commission mining for their own state treasury and probably will respond, well, these are just rogue states. And, these like terrorists, like Iran, this rogue state, and oh, this Russia, which is an enemy of the West. So, what do we care?
Right.
But the point is that we seem to be in front of another threshold. That's what I'm trying to say. Like where there are some developments where it's maybe just a matter of time before, what this one senator proposed, that no, well, maybe we should. And I mean, as you point out, certain federal states of the United States are already holding Bitcoin. So that the federal state at the federal state level, that's not too far away anymore. Like that option.
Yeah, no, there's several now. And I guess to your point, yeah, some of these nations might be backwater nations. There might even be nations that are sanctioned. But I think, there's an old analogy. Maybe it's not the best, but I think it might be a leading indicator. And I heard this years ago, but in business, a lot of the hedge funds and stuff, they would look to see what the porn industry was doing from a business standpoint because they were so frowned upon, or the gun industry, or the cannabis industry, because these industries adopted technologies before everybody else did for survival. And then everybody else would adopt the same type of technologies later. And so, the first industries to really go after the internet from a marketing standpoint were the industries I just mentioned. Well, the countries, and specific to Bitcoin, the countries that would be trying to protect themselves first from geopolitical policy or inflation or devaluation of their currencies would be the smaller countries, the more ragtag countries, maybe the countries that are out of favor with the West. But if I use the same analogy that I used with those companies that maybe weren't in favor either, that's the beginning. And then you get bigger countries saying, well, how is that benefiting you? The head of the I don't think it was Dubai. I believe it was Abu Dhabi, the leader of Abu Dhabi. I'd have to, and anybody can fact check this. I believe it was last spring. One of the heads of the Middle Eastern countries, anyway, I'm going to say it was Abu Dhabi. I could be wrong. Flew to El Salvador to meet with the El Salvadorian president, Bukele. Now, people were shocked by that because what would the leader of a United Arab Emirates country have to talk to El Salvador
Right.
about anything,
Yeah.
right? And the only thing that anybody could come up with was, I wonder if they want to know about Bitcoin from a national standpoint, in terms of maybe they're looking at it from a sovereign wealth perspective,
Mm.
you know, because it just didn't make any sense why this leader of this uber wealthy country would want to fly to El Salvador on his private jet and meet with the president. Well, El Salvador has nothing to offer a country like that. So we don't know what they went there for, but they did go there and they did meet, and that is there's video evidence of that as well. So the speculation is it was, how did you adopt Bitcoin? You know, what are the benefits? What are the cons? All that kind of stuff. I also, and again, this is pure conjecture, but a couple months after that meeting, there seemed to be several, one in particular, but several entities buying large blocks of Bitcoin on a systematic basis every day. So again, it's all conjecture, but the one they nicknamed him Mr. 100. It's probably an entity. It's probably a sovereign wealth fund, because they were buying 100 Bitcoin every day for
Mm.
months.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Price went up, they bought it. Price went down, they bought it. 100 Bitcoin every day. Yeah. So I don't know. I think these discussions are interesting. I think if President Trump wins, he's already stated his intention with Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin becomes much more favorable in the political class in the United States. And then we'll see what happens in terms of adoption and price and that kind of standpoint. But even if Kamala Harris wins, or Kamala, sorry, based on what she has said so far, I do think it would be at least a more positive outlook than has been in the recent past with the Democratic Party. So I think either one of them could be beneficial to Bitcoin. One probably more so than the other right now. But I think the path forward is much better than the path we've just come down from a political standpoint in the United States. Yeah, yeah.
So there's going to be less hostility and more discussion. At least that's sort of the minimum we can expect from both sides, to say there's going to be more discussion
Yeah,
probably, and more
I believe
thinking
so.
of how to make
Yeah,
this productive, and less less I don't know,
yeah,
criticism,
yeah.
and maybe
I,
with
I think that's a good way to put it, and so we'll see what happens moving forward. But it's interesting, the fact that Bitcoin is even in these discussions, in presidential debates, in presidential discussions, is just amazing, considering, you know, for me anyway, because I really started looking at Bitcoin seriously about 4 years ago. I'd probably looked at it several times previous to that, but you know, in terms of my life and truly getting involved, it was about 4.5 years ago. And we know what happened 4.5 years ago. And I've learned a lot since then. But the idea of presidents and former presidents and presidential candidates having this conversation, I mean, we forget RFK is just recently joined the Trump as an advisor, but up until a couple months ago, he was the third presidential candidate. And he stated this past summer that the vast majority of his net worth is in Bitcoin now.
wow.
And that had been a transition that had been going on for about a year and a half. So, you know, I don't know what RFK is worth, but being an elder Kennedy, I'm sure he has a comfortable lifestyle. And he said, yeah, the vast majority of his liquid net worth was in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
he
obviously,
also stated that he's, well, obviously is pro Bitcoin, because but that's news. I didn't know that he's also
yeah,
personally invested, but it's known that he was publicly outspoken for Bitcoin. And yeah, it's just also an interesting fact that he's now part of the Trump team, and he might be in the Trump administration in the future. And therefore,
yeah. Now,
then you have two strong proponents of Bitcoin in the Trump
well,
administration.
and actually, there's a third. The gentleman, one of the gentlemen that was was running for the Republican nomination, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Right.
And yeah, by all accounts, he did fairly well in terms of his run. He's now part of the Trump advisory group, if you will, and he's a big Bitcoiner as well.
Wow.
So there's actually several people in the Trump inner circle, if you will, at least in the political standpoint, that are pro Bitcoin, and so that's interesting.
Yeah. So either which way, there seems to be a positive outlook, and in one case the outlook is a little bit more positive. I mean, we never know what's going to happen in the future. We never know how politicians will decide something once they're elected. So we'll have to see.
Well, it's almost assuredly not what they said, but I'm hoping that for either of them, I hope it's a more positive path forward than the recent past. And just based on their words, it does sound like, at least for one of them, that it could be a very positive short-term future. So we'll see. But I think both could be positive for Bitcoin moving forward. One probably more so than the other based on what they said. But as you so eloquently pointed out, politicians say a lot of things before they get elected. So.
Yeah, just on a side note, I mean, here in Germany, like, don't know everything which is going on in all European states, but I can speak for Germany that this subject is not part of the discussion. There was a member of parliament who tried to, bring this into the parliament in terms of like educating the members of parliament on the Bitcoin subject. There was like just like an open discussion on that for members of parliament, like an educational discussion. But that's it. There is no, I don't know. We maybe in the next election this will be a subject, but I don't know. I don't think so. I'm just mentioning this because I think, as usual, the United States is the first which brings up certain topics, and then sooner or later it comes here. That's what I see with any political development. It's very strange, but you see, German filmmaker once said he always looks into the United States because there we can see our future 10 years ahead of us. I think that time has sort of like shrunk down a little bit, but that's still what's happening. You see certain political developments, streams in the United States, and you'll know, well, this is coming here. It's just a matter of a couple of years, and we'll have similar debates over here. So I'm waiting for that to happen, and then when it comes, I'll let you know.
Well, actually, I'm being sarcastic a little bit, but it's kind of ironic because Germany sold all their Bitcoin this past summer. And since they've sold it, it's gone up about 30%. So
and they could use that Bitcoin, or I don't know.
But in fairness to Germany, as part of the European Union, the European Central Bank is not in favor of Bitcoin. They really don't like Bitcoin, and Christine Lagarde in particular has very strong opinions about it. So, Germany's kind of part of a collective, and the head of that collective, from a banking perspective anyway, is not somebody that's in favor of it.
But the winds can change, and when the winds change, they change basically coming from the west. And then also the ECB will probably start singing a different tune suddenly about Bitcoin.
Well, and to that point, and again, it could just be coincidence, but Saudi Arabia and a lot of the Middle Eastern countries started asking a lot of Bitcoin questions after Donald Trump made that comment. So he made that comment in May, and almost within days or weeks anyway, there seemed to be a lot of interest coming from Middle East about what is this Bitcoin thing anyway?
Of course, makes sense.
Yeah, of course. I mean, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. It should be fun times, and it should be more positive, in 25 and 26, 27 than it has been in 21, 22, and 23. So we can hope.
At least something. Look, I'm glad to hear some positive news. That's great. So let's end it here on this positive note. Thanks a lot for the insight. and let's see what happens in a
Yeah,
couple of days. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
thanks a lot.
Okay, have a good one.